Today, I'm going to share the behind-the-scenes method I used to make this custom abstract landscape. Making your own art is so fun and rewarding, and with this method, it's also easy and totally doable for anyone out there, regardless of artistic background. You can adapt this to match any color scheme and even go beyond landscape. The world is really your oyster here, so if you're ready to get painting, just keep watching. I want to paint some kind of mountain range or abstract landscape. So after taking to the internet, I printed off some inspiration pictures. These are super helpful to have on hand. The first is a painting I saw in Target that I almost bought before I decided to DIY this project. The second and third are from an artist I follow on Instagram named Rebecca King. And these three all have a very similar organic, flowing, airy style that I like. The final image is a picture of the Rocky Mountains that I'm going to use as a composition reference. And I'm actually going to trace the major features with a Sharpie, so going along the mountains and hills, etc. And you'll see why in just a minute. Composition is one of the hardest parts of making good art, so if you're a beginner, this is such a great hack to just let nature do it for you. I am in the midst of redecorating my guest bedroom and am looking for a piece of art to hang above the bed. I have a throw blanket and some decor pillows here. The benefit of custom painting is that I can incorporate this color scheme just how I like. So in this case, a mix of muted greens, beiges, browns, and a pop of burnt yellow or ochre color. I'm going to keep these items to the side to refer to, and I highly suggest you find some and do the same. Alright, we have all of our prep done, so let's get started painting. Step 1, canvas. I got this large used canvas from Goodwill for $12, but you can also buy a new canvas from Michaels, Joann, or another craft store. This thing was very dusty, so I made sure to clean it up really well with a gentle cleaning spray before I began. After that, it's time to reset this canvas back to a blank page. So I actually grabbed an old paint sample from Lowe's in warm white color called Alabaster, and I did one nice smooth layer over all of this. The paint underneath is acrylic or latex, so the paint sample is going to stick just fine for me, but if you have any concerns about adherence or longevity, this is also a great time to use a high-quality primer or even an artist gesso instead. Once that base layer is dried, it's time to transcribe my reference photo onto the canvas. So remember where we used those Sharpie lines and drew that mountain photo? All I did was take this page and flip it over, and where the Sharpie bled through, I now have a simple, inverted outline to trace directly onto the canvas. The next step is optional but a lot of fun. I wanted to add an organic texture to my canvas. I've seen a number of people using joint compound on canvas, so I figured I would try that out. I grabbed this little jar of spackling and a putty knife and started to apply this plaster along the ridge of my mountains. And I used my picture as a reference to see which areas should be rock versus grass versus trees. Then I just let the putty knife flow as loosely as possible and really embrace the grainy texture that this stuff provides. Doesn't this look awesome? Adding organic textures or unplanned elements to your art is a great way to level up the visual interest, especially when the subject is something natural like a landscape. You don't have to plan it all out, just let nature do the work. Once the spackle is dried, I wanted to do one more base coat to seal it in, and also to make sure all of the previous painting was completely covered. I was running low on the alabaster white color, so I actually went through my painting box and grabbed some other colors to mix together. Again, this was a great way to add some subtle depth. I'm going to start at the back of the image and work my way forward, which means we're starting with the sky. And I wanted to try out a watery wash, so I'm going to dilute some gray and beige paint with water in a 50-50 ratio. And then I'm going to spread that in little splotches across the sky area. I know it's a bit hard to see, but I'm essentially letting pools of water form, and then they collect more paint pigment in certain areas in a very natural and organic way, and leave them behind when the water dries off. This gives kind of a very subtle, overcast look to the sky. Once that was dry, I moved on to the mountains, and this time I did a dark drizzle of gray paint directly onto the canvas, and then splashes of medium gray wash on top. When the water meets the darker drizzle underneath, it blends the two colors together to make a mix of saturations. I'm using my brush to press the paint just up to the edge of the plaster texture, making sure I don't have any runoff into the sky. Now for something fun! An important part of abstract painting is to add layers. So remember the pop of yellow from my color scheme? I know I needed to incorporate it somewhere, and I figured a base layer on the entire earth section of this painting might be a good place to start. This might look a little shocking right now, but trust me, it's going to be toned down a lot with subsequent layers, and it also helps provide some subtle cohesion between the mountains and grass. I did grab a paper towel and dab away some of the mountain peaks where I felt this paint was covering a bit too much. Time for the grassy hills, which follow a very similar wash process. And I want to note here that with every color I mix up, I am still referring to my color palette, so the blanket and decor pillows that I bought, to make sure that I'm getting each color just right. Mixing muted natural colors by hand can be really complicated, so that's why I love these paint samples. It's just really great to pick a paint chip off the shelf and know exactly what I'm going to get. If you do want to mix custom colors with acrylic paint, I have a great hack for you though. This is a website tool called PaintMaker by a company named Sensual Logic, and I'm going to leave the link for this in the description box below. So basically, it will create a recipe for you to mix any color from a number of popular paint brands. There's a paid version to add all the colors that you own, but I find the free version is all I need. So let's select Winsor Newton here at the top, and the default is for red, blue, yellow, white, and black paint. So now I'm going to pop over to the Sherwin-Williams website, or any other paint store website will work, and I'm going to select a color, so it looks like Red End Point is the color of the year. And then if I click the Details tab, it pulls up a hex code, so 6 numbers or letters. I'm going to copy that and go back to the PaintMaker tool, paste, and then click Calculate Recipes. Ta-da! So looking at this first result, I can see that to make the color, I need majority white paint, a good amount of yellow, and then a bit of red, and a tiny little bit of black and blue that I might even just leave out. So to mix this color, I just need to follow the recipe the best I can. Super helpful, right? Alright, back to painting. I'm not in love with the yellow on the mountains so much, it looks too much like grass, so I'm going to take a pinky beige, which is another color from my color palette, and scrape that on with a putty knife. Between the spackle we put on at the beginning and the various layers of paint, we do have a lot of texture on the canvas that I can use the putty knife with in a similar way to a dry brush, so just catching it on the high spots. Another thing I'm doing is applying the paint and then scraping it gently with the side of the putty knife to achieve streaks. Both options are great ways to keep up with this organic texture that we're building. Are you seeing a theme here yet? I'm going to do the same with some white as well as some dark gray at the ridges of the mountain. We have all of our major shapes blocked out now, so everything's a matter of detail, and a very easy way to add detail is to think about highlights and shadows. You can see this process again in the hills. I'm going to add a highlight along the bottom of each hill, almost like a mist, and then a darker green along the ridges to make them pop off the background. Don't forget to stand back every now and then to get a feel for what's working and what's not. In this case, I felt the hills were way too bold and overpowering the mountains, which I wanted to be the main feature. So I went back and blended them a bit to tone them down. The final tip is done is better than perfect. Artists can be their own worst critics, so remember that perfect does not exist. At this point, your painting is no doubt beautiful and deserves to be hung. So let's move on to a bonus how-to: custom framing. I grabbed some select pine 1x3s from the hardware store and marked out where I needed to make 45-degree cuts, one cut at a time. And then I actually decided to go old school and cut these with a hand saw using this simple plastic jig that my husband picked up at a garage sale. Pine is a soft wood, so it took just a minute or two to get through each piece. You can definitely use a miter saw for this, but just be aware that the 45-degree marking on your miter saw might not be perfect. So be sure to cut a test piece and measure it with a speed square or a protractor until you get the right angle. Once I got my groove going, I just needed to repeat and repeat and repeat. I did a dry fit, and then when I was happy with everything, I grabbed some Varathane wood stain in the color Early American and did a quick coat on everything. Then it was time for assembly. We laid the painting on the ground and then clamped the frame pieces gently into place so they stayed straight, level, and aligned. Then we went around with a brad nailer and tacked in each piece one at a time. You can also use trim nails with a small hammer here if you don't own a brad nailer. It was a bit fussy, so it definitely helped to have an extra set of hands. And we also did our best to protect the painted surface to prevent any wear or peeling or chipping of the paint. Once that was done, I grabbed some stainable wood filler and filled in any small gaps in the joints. Unless you're an expert woodworker, it's going to be near impossible to get everything lined up perfectly. So don't worry, that's what filler is here. It's going to help you get the perfect finish. Once the filler was dry, I just needed to sand back any excess and dab on a bit more stain, and then we're ready for the final reveal. I am so happy with how this turned out, and better yet, I love how it pulls together the new linens and decor pillows in my guest bedroom. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this method in the comments section down below, and if you have any tips or tricks you think would make this even better, please let me know that too. I am always open to learning new skills. I really hope you try this for yourself and let your creativity shine. Seeing this on the wall is so much more gratifying to me than seeing any store-bought art, and I really want you to feel that feeling too. So get out there, get crafting, and I will see you next time.